recently on my channel I've done a number of videos covering heavyweight prospects. Most notably Joseph Parker, who fought and beat Cali Meehan in the previous week. Now in the comments section, for the messages that I get, one name has cropped up several times in the course of the conversation, which is a guy called Izu Ugonoh. Now I've done my research and homework on this guy, and I got a request from Corey, who's a viewer of the channel, to do a bit of a video with my thoughts on him. So I'm going to put it down. First things first, I've done my homework to an extent. This guy's an ex-kickboxer. He's a Nigerian who grew up and lived in Poland. He's Nigerian in terms of his heritage, but he considers himself Polish. But he's now training and working with the Joseph Parker team. He's been sparring with Vladimir Klitschko, and he's relatively highly thought of in boxing circles. Right now I think he's 14-0 with 11 knockouts. He's been inactive. I think 2013, 2014 he's been fairly off the radar. Earlier on in his career he was fighting at cruiserweight, but he's come back. He's had a bit of a bang. He's been fighting on Joseph Parker undercards, and he scored a pretty devastating first round knockout last time out. So he's climbing up in people's rankings. I think Boxrec have him ranked at 115, which is fairly low as these things go. But he's someone whose name I've seen crop up on forums, whose name I'm consistently seeing in the comments section of my videos. Certain people telling me that, you know, he beat Lucas Brown, he beat Anthony Joshua, etc. So I wanted to basically discuss that in more detail. Now there's a number of guys who have moved over from MMA or kickboxing to boxing who are currently active in the heavyweight scene. Obviously Vitaly Klitschko was a kickboxer. Alexander Ustinov was a kickboxer. Lucas Brown did MMA. Dillian White did kickboxing and MMA. You know, I think it's possible to make the transition from one sport to another. Sometimes you'll find fighters are lacking in certain boxing fundamentals, but one thing I do tend to notice about kickboxers is they're kind of light on their feet and they're decent movers. And I guess you have to be when it's a sport that involves throwing your legs up at all sorts of different angles. You've got to be flexible, you've got to be athletic, and you've got to be able to move. And when I've watched this guy, Izu Ugonoh, that's one of the first things that struck me is, you know, he moves around the ring nicely. I think in his last fight he weighed in at 230 pounds. He's 6'5", but the guy's an athlete. You know, the guy moves around the ring nicely indeed. Now I watched his fight with Julius Long, and he went the distance with Julius Long. That's one of the reasons I chose to watch that fight, because a number of his recent performances have been early blowouts, you know, where he's looked like a, you know, like any heavyweight on the way up looks like when they're blowing out lower level opposition. But I watched this fight against Julius Long, and I thought, in terms of the positives, certainly the guy moves around the ring well. He's light on his feet, he's agile, he is an athlete. He jabs nicely. He jabs to the body, he jabs to the head. He's quite accurate with it, and it's got a good bit of snap to it, the jab. It's a weapon. It's something that, when you've got a heavyweight who can move, and you've got a heavyweight who can jab, he's already ahead of most of the competition in the division. Then, the thing I noticed about him is he's patient as well. He's a guy who fights at his own pace. He kind of doesn't like to have, you know, he doesn't like to fight overly aggressively in terms of his pace. You know, I noticed in his last fight, the one-round blowout, even when he knocked the opponent down, he gave them plenty of space. Sorry, I'm drinking out of Mrs. Gossip's mug, not my choice, I promise. But I noticed in his last fight, he dropped the opponent heavily. He let the opponent get up, and he kind of circled him for 5-10 seconds. You know, we're talking about a very patient operator here. Not someone who rushes him. You know, if Deontay Wilder did that, he'd be running in, windmilling, he'd be trying to kill the guy. You know, Izu Ugonoh, he was more of a coarser stalker, if you like. He dropped his guy, he hurt him, and he got him up, he circled him, and he waited for the time to come in again. And I like that about him. He's not over-eager. He stalks his prey, he uses the jab, and that makes you an effective guy. He seems to carry a level of power. People online are talking about him being a very, very big puncher. And I'm not sure about that based on the Julius Long performance. It strikes me that, whilst obviously he does have a fair bit of power, 11 and 14, some of the opposition he's been in with has been very, very untested. A lot of the guys he fought early on were very early in their careers as well. And it's probably fair to say that Julius Long is the most well-known of the opponents he's been in with, and Julius Long took him the distance. Now, with Ugonoh, the fact that he used to fight at cruiserweight is a tiny bit of a concern for me. Now, I know he came into the ring last time looking ripped as hell at 230 pounds, which suggests that as he gets older, he'll get heavier and he'll grow in more and more to a heavyweight. But when I look at him, I kind of wonder if he's a bit lean for heavyweight, And don't get me wrong, there's guys with similar physiques to him, like Bryant Jennings, who are effective in the heavyweight division. But what I'm talking about is him fighting at the very, very top, because people are talking about this guy as having a real potential in the sport. And I think Julius Long gave him certain problems. Now, Julius Long is an awkward operator. We saw the problems he gave Lucas Brown recently. He's a massive guy. I think he's like 7'2", 7'3", something like that. He must weigh 20 stone and he's got ridiculous reach. So it's no surprise that early on Julius Long gave this guy problems. Obviously Izu was a novice and was a lot smaller. But certain things that Julius Long was able to do, kind of keeping him at range, etc., makes me wonder how this guy would fare if he fought a Vladimir Klitschko, a Tyson Fury, a Deontay Wilder. Whereas Joseph Parker, you would see trying to bob inside the jab and come inside and get in on an opponent. I'm not sure that's the way Izu Ugonoh likes to fight. In fact, there was one time he did get in on Julius Long, and Julius Long was kind of able to manhandle him ever so slightly. For me, Ugonoh is more a guy who likes to box from the outside potentially, sort of pick his spots a bit more. But I'm not sure how easy he'd find that at his size against a guy like Anthony Joshua, or against a guy like Tyson Fury, who's bigger than him, heavier than him, longer than him, and whose jab is a battering ram that's hitting you consistently. Part of me does wonder whether, if he could still make cruiserweight, and I know he weighed in at 230 last time, so it's a long way off, but part of me wonders if he's one of those kind of guys who is maybe too big for cruiserweight, too small to compete in the modern heavyweight generation, where you've got guys like Klitschko, Wilder, Fury ruling the roost. Now, I saw a photo of him next to Parker, and he does look a good inch or so taller than Parker. But you just look at Parker, you look at the thickness of him, you look at how solid Parker is. The guy's built like a brick. I don't see that with Ugonoh. For me, Ugonoh has got a similar physique to Deontay Wilder, but Deontay Wilder is just taller, generally bigger, but they're both that kind of lean physique. And I just wonder if he's going to be able to compete with the sort of heavyweight giants as he moves up in class, because I think if you're a smaller guy, you've got to have more elements to your game than being a sort of cautious jabber from range. And I wonder if he's slightly gun-shy to an extent. I see him as a guy who's very patient, very intelligent fighter actually, very tactical, a real sort of chess player type if you like, which is all well and good. But if you're a smaller guy, you've got to be able to bob under that jab, come up, hit the opponent in the body. You've got to be able to get inside and have it out on the inside. And I'm just not sure he's made for that kind of fight. Now, it's all kind of pie in the skies to an extent, because the level of opponent he's been in with hasn't really been anything to test him so far. As I say, the best opponent, or most recognisable opponent on his ledger is Julius Long, who's an awkward, tricky, experienced, well-established operator, but a long way away from being a ranked heavyweight. Now, Julius Long is a journeyman, let's have it right. So, Izu, looking at his resume, he's been quite stop-start. There's been periods of activity, periods of inactivity. There's been changes of weight class. But now he's 28. He's coming off at the back of quite an impressive knockout win in his last fight. It's time to see him step up. It's time to see him in a fight. You know, you look at the sort of, this guy's had 14 fights. The level of opposition he's been in with compared to like Joseph Parker, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White is very, very poor. I know he's not as well known as those guys. I know he's not as highly rated a prospect as those guys, so it's understandable there's been less money behind him in terms of buying in opponents. But he's got to, as he comes close to 30, he's got to step up and he's got to fight, you know, a Brian Minto or a Kevin Johnson or a Sherman Williams, just a kind of C-level fighter to see where he's at against that sort of level. In essence, like what I'm getting at is, he's an interesting guy, he hits hard, he's a chess player, very, very intelligent, cautious fighter, who really, really focuses on picking his spots, which are likeable in a heavyweight. But is he too small? Is he too one-dimensional? Does he lack the inside game? You know, these are all questions that he hasn't answered yet. And the way he fights gives me doubts over it. It's one of those kind of things where you won't be able to tell unless you see him step up and fight a proper heavyweight. You know, someone in the top 50 who you can use as a more effective measuring stick. But right now, being brutally honest, I find him a less appealing prospect than the likes of Joshua, White and Parker. I find him smaller and perhaps less well-rounded. But I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen all his fights. I think I've seen 3 of his fights in total. And he's obviously doing certain things right. He's with a good team, he's sparring with Klitschko, he's being talked about, and he's knocking people out. So I don't mean to hate on the guy. Certainly not my purpose. But a lot of questions to answer and a lot of bridges to cross before really I'm talking about him in the same terms as I am Joseph Parker or Anthony Joshua or a prospect to that level. Look, I'm interested in learning more here. This isn't just about my thoughts. People watching this video may know this guy a lot better than I do. May have seen his videos a lot more than I have in his fights. Leave your comments. Let me know what you thought. You know, do you agree with me? Am I right on his limitations? How far do you see him going, and who would you like to see him fight next? Let me know your thoughts. I'm keen to discuss. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me the thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, just checking this out, please do hit the subscribe. I've got some new videos to come that I wouldn't want you to miss. Thanks very much for watching.